Hello and welcome back to another All Things M365 Compliance podcast. And today we're going to be going through what's new and coming soon for February 2023. I'm Ryan Murphy, a compliance practice lead at Epic Global. And of course, as always, I'm joined by Nikki. Hi, Nikki.
Hi, thanks, Ryan. So I'm Nikki Chappell. I'm a principal cloud architect at Cloudway, a Microsoft partner. And both myself and Ryan are passionate about everything Microsoft 365 compliance. So this podcast today is all about kind of what's new and coming up in Microsoft Purview in February 2023. So, Ryan, what would you think is your top tip or key change for this month?
So I think first and foremost is a good topic we brought up just before we started recording was around the syntax licensing for the SharePoint library. Now, I've been pretty keen with this because I think this is a fantastic feature, but given the news that you're about to share regarding the prices, excuse me, the pricing and the pricing model for it, I think a lot of people are going to be on the back foot with it. Because I would imagine a lot of people have taken advantage of going out, getting this configured, having it do the auto labeling inside of the actual SharePoint library. Now to find out the news that you're going to share, I don't think people are going to be too happy. So why don't you give us all that news, Nikki?
So I think one of the things that working with clients with Microsoft Purview is that we'd thought that the ability to add a default sensitivity label to a document library was going to be part of the E5 suite. So it's a really strong, valuable tool to be able to say, I'm provisioning a team, and while I'm provisioning that team, let's put a default sensitivity label on the document library so all those files inherit that, would be part of that. Microsoft have just announced something called the Microsoft Syntex SharePoint Advanced Management licenses. Now, this is an add-on license. And what we've been having is a bit of a debate, I think, a little bit unclear is, was this going to be part of the E5 licensing? It looks like that this is going to be a separate license. So according to the documentation, and we will share the link, it looks like it's going to be $3 per user per month. And all users in the tenant will need to have this license. So there's some really exciting features. So it's not just that ability to add a sensitivity label to a document library, but you've got other functionality. So you can create more advanced conditional access policies with those authentication contexts. So again, that was in preview before. So again, I think a lot of people were using that to say, for my particular types of groups or teams, I want to have stronger conditional access policies. That looks like that's in scope. You've got the data access governance insight report. So that was in the SharePoint Admin Center. That gives you a view of who's sharing files externally, etc. That's now part of this license. There's also some brand new things in here, which I think are really good. You've now got this ability to create granular access control policies for OneDrive. So you can limit who can access OneDrive to members of a security group. So in some of those organizations where they're saying, actually, I don't want people creating content in my OneDrive, it's much easier now you can target that out. You can also create access control policies as well for your SharePoint sites. So this means that only the members of the group have access to the SharePoint site. Whereas before, when it was the sharing policy was internal or existing guests or new and existing guests, now you can lock it down and saying, actually, this SharePoint site is only going to be accessible by the members of the group. So that's that kind of real true locked down that, when you've got that top secret, highly confidential group where you don't want other people in the organization to see it. I think, there's some really useful things. So that's really for secure and access. And they've also got information in here for managing your content life cycle. So you can block downloads for your SharePoint and OneDrive sites. So you can block the download of files. You can block the downloading of Teams meeting recordings. and you've got more information on SharePoint admin actions as well, who's been doing what, just in case you've got that rogue admin. So I think for organizations where you're working with that kind of confidential data, I think it's useful. But I think for a lot of organizations, that's only a subset of the organization. However, it looks like the licensing, do you have to license every single person in your tenant, or is it just the people in scope? It's still a little bit unclear at the moment. So I think my news is if you've been using those authentication context for your container labels, if you've been using the default sensitivity label on your document library, find out a little bit more. You don't want these unexpected license hit coming forward. Maybe you want to maybe pause some of these projects until this becomes a little bit more clear.
So there's some good features there. And I think Syntax brings a lot of control around what you can do in your environment, which is obviously a plus for us compliance admins. But there is that crept up cache that you may need to be expelling to have those features switched on. And I think I, for one, know customers that have the default SharePoint library sensitivity label applied to it, and the additional controls around the OneDrive that you just mentioned as well. They're probably going to start to roll back those if that's going to be too costly for them, especially if it's going to be around the £3, €3, whatever the case may be, marker for a large environment of 250,000 users. That cost is going to increase significantly. So
yeah, and I think that's my concern as well. And I know Joanne Klein had also, posted up that, we're all working with these companies. A lot of time they are the large companies as well. And, we've been advising them based on the thought that this is going to be E5. If you've got the full E5 suite, you've got everything. But obviously we've seen not only with this, but also with things like Teams Premium as well, there are now other added features within that kind of compliance security world that are now on top of E5.
Yeah, which is spawn out of different licensing models, like you say, the Teams Premium, the Syntax, but they all still map back to compliance. So everybody initially looking at these product features are going to think that's got to be included in my E5. But now turns out it's not actually included in your E5. There's actually a different licensing bundle for it, a licensing add-on for it. So that's definitely something that we need to watch out for in the future, especially with all these great tools and features and roles that are coming out. Is it actually mapped into that E5 model that you've currently got, or does it incur an increase in cost because it's an add-on? So yeah, I think that's a good one to start with this month. Yeah, for sure. Anything else out there, Nikki, that's took a fancy?
Yeah, so I've been working this month with a large organisation on records management, and there's some really new record management features that are coming out. So they've got some Graph API functionality coming out under beta. So for me, that was really, really useful. Perfect timing for me, doing a proof of concept with the organisation, going through formal records management. There's a lot of event-based retention and also dispositions. And, up to now, without that API to do event-based retention, you had to go into the Purview Center. Really, we're talking about business people wanting to be able to trigger retention. Their project is end. It's the end of tax year. You don't necessarily want it all to be an admin. But now you've got the Graph API. I can extend that out, and then I can create an app. So it's a business-driven app, or I can even extend it and link it in with a third-party system. So if you've got a contracts management system and your contracts have come to the end of term and you want to keep your contracts for, maybe 5 years since the contract expired or the contract closed, the fact in the contract system you've say closed, that can then trigger the Graph API to actually create an event. So anything with contract number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, the event starts based on the closure date that's come out, say, of the contracts management system. So, I've created a pseudo version of that. I'm using a Microsoft list to do that. So you enter stuff on the Microsoft list, and that is then triggering it. And it's just so simple and so easy. And it's also fail safe, once you've got those rules in. But it's not just, you've got events, so you can create and manage your events, your event types. your labels, and even your kind of disposition processes. You can export out your disposition. So I think Microsoft are now pulling in these endpoints, because Microsoft is just one of many systems that organizations have to manage. We have to kind of remember that. I think we forget sometimes, being Microsoft experts, we think it's the only world, but there's lots of other systems out there, and people might want to manage them centrally. So this now gives us the opportunity to extend that out. So yeah, I'm really excited to get to grips with it.
Yeah, I saw Ekatoli had released some information on the Graph API. I'll link it in the episode here, because I do think a lot of people are going to want to take advantage of that, because using that Graph API to do as much automation as you possibly can, especially when it comes to the complex retention labels, dispositions, and so on and so forth, that would certainly be something that my customers, your customers, and anybody watching or listening to this would actually benefit from. And sticking with that retention piece, you mentioned disposition reviews just there as well. And I saw on the roadmap that Microsoft now offer a PowerShell commandlet so you can basically go in, run it as a scheduled task if you want to, and export that data out. The information given is this will enable admins to export the list of items pending disposition review or disposed items for a label using PowerShell commandlet. Still has a 50,000 limit to it. Something to bear in mind. Okay, so what you can actually do now is, if you want to get that information out on a scheduled task once a week, once a fortnight, once a month, whatever, you don't have to go into the portal. You can simply write that PowerShell command in as a scheduled task and export that data out. That could probably be linked into the Graph API you were just talking about as well, couldn't it, Nikki?
Yeah, I think there's lots of interesting things that you can do once you've got that data. And I think, organizations, are working on huge volumes of these data. And the standard disposition review now is, you get an email to say you're notified of a disposition. Well, if you're thinking of an organization, the one I'm working with is got several hundred different retention labels that are all going to go through a disposition process. So you don't want your email box just being cluttered up with this notification, I've got another disposition, or a reminder to go and do it. You want some other way of managing that. So I think that's quite useful for that ability to be able to create your own sort of custom processes.
Yeah, indeed. I think that's a good step from Microsoft to give you some automation of that as well, to get that out. Sticking with data lifecycle management and records management, this month, simulation mode for automatically applied retention labels. I think this is a big one. I think this is very, very helpful, especially when you have large organizations and you want to understand, okay, I'm about to deploy these retention labels. I want to know the impact of them. What items are actually going to be covered by each of these retention labels? From what I can see and what I've read, it kind of works the same process, and maybe even uses the same engine as the service side labeling for information protection, where essentially you build the labels, you click it into simulation mode, and off it goes throughout your environment, picking out any context matched in or any retention labels that might be matched to that particular policy or label, and then brings them all back in a nice visual aspect for you so you can go through them. You don't have to wait 7, 10, 14 days, or whatever the case may be, if you wanting to trial these retention labels out in a demo environment. This now gives you the ability to say, I want to configure, I want to outroll, and I want to get my information back as soon as possible. I think that's a great addition.
Yeah. And I think it's really important when we're considering retention labels that there are some constrictions with them. So once you create a retention label, you cannot change the name. And if you've got that label and the rules are start retention based on the labeled date, you can't even go in and change that period of time. So you really do want to make sure when you're dealing with kind of these record labels that you're stamping the right label on the right content. It's even worse if you're talking about regulatory labels, because once they're added, they're added. There is no way to remove them. So you do need to be very certain what you're doing, because often it's large volumes. I mean, previously, how I'd have to work is that I would have my a keyword query based on, the different data, set up all the different refinable strings or the keyword queries. And then I would have to put it into the kind of ordinary search engine and actually go through that and see which hits I was doing, or go and do a content search or something like that to say, am I getting the right hits? And so it was kind of quite complex, whereas now you can try it out and say, am I happy? Yes, no. If I'm happy, then I can go and label the data. And of course, with the processing engine, with retention, this labeling isn't immediate. So you've got to create your label.
Yep.
You publish your auto labeling policy. Now that can take sort of like 7 days before that's even going to appear in your tenant. Yep. And then it's going to take at least another 7 days for it to go through and scan all your data and start classifying the data, and adding those retention labels. So in my test, it was taking, coming up to like 14 days, it could be, before that data is being labeled. So, it's good that you can actually test it out first rather than waiting and then wait 14 days and then find out, oops, I've overextended the search and it is now classifying, and tagging content that it shouldn't.
Yeah, indeed. So I think that for me is a standout from the changes that have happened for DLM and RM over the last couple of months. I think that's a phenomenal addition, because like you say, the amount of times you've stood there with your finger over the button thinking, do I press it? Is it going to get everything I need it to do, or is it going to get everything I don't need it to do? This really gives you that visualization of, well, actually, I've gone and scanned everything based on the criteria you've put into me, and here's what I'm going to label. So straight away, okay. And then you can start to sift items out if you want to start to base your KQL query differently, or if, like you say, event based on retention start from, or whatever the case may be. It's all there for you in that portal for you to digest. So I think kudos to the DLM and RM team for this. I think this is a phenomenal addition. Moving on from DLM, unless you've got any other DLM ones up your sleeve.
Kind of key things that I've seen that are exciting, that are kind of just landing at the moment.
I think another one for me, I probably bore everybody with eDiscovery now, but I think the one that I've noticed is the eDiscovery Standard to eDiscovery Premium case upgrade tool. Now, this might not be relevant for everybody, but I can imagine, as I've seen with some of my customers, and as I was explaining to you just before we started recording, Nikki, we have customers out there that they'll look at eDiscovery Premium and think it's too complex. eDiscovery Standard gives me what I need, and they start that process off in eDiscovery Standard, and then they realize then they need a review set or something, to continue that case on. This now gives you the ability to take that eDiscovery Standard case. Doesn't mention anything about content search. It just mentions eDiscovery Standard. Take that eDiscovery Standard case and then migrate it into eDiscovery Premium, where you get the full workflow and the full pipeline of eDiscovery Premium. So if there's anybody out there at this moment in time thinking, I'm going to have to recreate this in eDiscovery Premium, you don't have to do that now. And I do know after speaking to a couple of customers the last 3-4 months, they would always start off with eDiscovery Premium as their baseline and then think, oh, I'll work my way up to eDiscovery Premium, without realizing you can't actually bring those cases across. Well, now you can. And again, huge benefit for those who are wanting to do this.
And I think the other thing with the eDiscovery, what put people off with the eDiscovery Premium, as you said, it was quite a complex process. However, they've got that new case format now, and that is just so much easier as well. You haven't got those necessary complexities. It's flowing much better. So it does make it easier to actually start. So I would recommend anyone that's got the E5 compliance licenses always now start off with the eDiscovery Premium, even if you've looked at it before and thought it was a bit complex. Go back and have a look, because it's only, I think, since the beginning of this year that the new case format has landed.
Yeah, I think we mentioned it on the January one. So if anybody's interested and they've not watched the January one, go back. Nikki and I actually go through that in quite some detail, because for me that was a huge change, because you're not having to create the case and then add your data, add your actual admins in, or your groups in, or your compliance boundaries in after the fact. You can actually do that now in that new new wizard. And you can also do other things like threading and some other stuff that you was having to do in the settings piece. So if you haven't watched the January one just yet, go back and have a look at that one, because that goes into a little bit more detail. But for eDiscovery this month, I think that's my standout change, introduction, should I say. Yeah. Anything more from your side, Nikki?
So I'm trying to think, from nothing more, I don't think, from the eDiscovery side. Just another one regarding a bit on the licensing side.
Yeah.
So people might have heard about Teams Premium. So, and this ability, well, it's like it's an add-on license. And then people have been hearing about, oh, I can now add protection to my Teams meetings and my Teams meeting invitation. Again, another caveat, that does require you to have this add-on Teams Premium license.
Yeah.
So yeah, again, there's more features here coming out, whereby if you want to have those real secure meetings, whereby you can have watermarks across your screen to protect information, you can stop chats, etc. in your meeting, you can have different policies for your different levels of security. Even if you've got the E5 licensing, you're going to have to do that upgrade as well.
Okay, so that again comes in with that Teams Premium additional bolt-on cost, does it? Yeah. I mean, again, it's a great thing to have, but it's just a shame it doesn't come under your E5 licensing for compliance. It's just a shame it has to be another bolt-on license. But there are going to be customers out there, especially one of my customers spring to mind straight away, because they're a private investment bank, and they essentially wanted all meetings to have no chat, to be controlled, to not share the documentation outside of the chat and all the rest of it.
Yep.
The feature's there for you, but again, it's going to be an additional cost, and I think might just put them off, or they might just swallow the cost and just continue with it. But again, great addition. Just a shame it needs a bit more money to get onto it.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I think that's it from my side for February's rundown.
Yeah,
How about you?
I think that's kind of the key things, or particularly the areas I've been kind of looking at this month. So I think this month has really been focused on, data lifecycle management, records management, and then eDiscovery. So I think these things have just come at the right time for me, working with customers. You think, this is great new functionality to really try it out. And I think, really adds benefits.
Yeah, indeed. And like I said, kudos to the data lifecycle management team, Erica and her team there for the Graph API and the other additions to DLM this month. I think DLM's moving on nicely, and I think over the next 12 to 14 months, I hope that, it's going to be a lot more that comes out that we can benefit from. So yeah, that's it from me for February's rundown. And I'll probably see you next time.
Coming down the line. So thank you for joining us.
Yeah, indeed. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.